Beyond the Game. Brought to you by Turkish Airlines.
Over the next 4 weeks, the women of world football will unite to shine on their biggest stage in the sport. 24 teams showcasing the finest talents in women's football will battle it out over 9 cities in France, all for the chance to be crowned world champions. And the road to Lyon actually starts here in Paris. I'm Samantha Johnson and welcome to this special edition of Beyond the Game as we look ahead to the 2019 Women's World Cup. 2019 is the year for women's football, with attendance records smashed across European leagues and competitions, and governing bodies and sponsors finally putting their money where their mouths are. All these groundbreaking moments have led to the world's biggest women's sporting event, the Women's World Cup. And as Robin Adams reports, all of this bodes rather well for the future of the women's game.
More money, more interest, more fans. Women's football is riding a crest of a worldwide wave.
Can we have a fair to London?
Leagues and competitions have consistently been smashing attendance records this year. And an even bigger turnout is expected when the World Cup kicks off in France on Friday. There's been significant investment in women's football. FIFA have tripled their financial contribution for the Women's World Cup to $50 million. The prize money has also been increased by 100%.
The women's game has grown so much and we're feeling that so much more than we ever have, especially this last year.
Well, I think you saw what effect it had when we won bronze medal. I think women's football really kicked off then, and it was a really exciting time to be a part of women's football. Obviously attendance has rocketed and it's been growing since then.
The Women's World Cup has only been around since 1991. The tournament's current defending champions are the United States, who also happen to be the most successful team with 3 titles. 24 nations will be competing in the month-long football extravaganza. Tickets are still relatively easy to come by. Road trip, anyone?
Well, earlier on, I spoke to Faduma Olo, who is a journalist and football coach, about the growth of the women's game.
I think a lot of it's to do with the increase in funding that's been quite recently, increase in participation amongst younger girls who are taking part on a more grassroots level, so schools pushing it a lot more has kind of helped that, and the fact that fans are being encouraged to go to the games and go to the stands and take part, be part of the movement and be part of the game, so I think it's been a big part of what's made it happen. I think afterwards, the most important thing is that people have got to go to games. Like, the biggest thing about women's game is the fact that it doesn't average that many fans compared to a lot of other games, especially in the men's game. So we need to make sure that people keep going to games. So whether that is your local non-league or your league competition or your national team, you need to go out and support the teams and make sure that there is a demand, because if there is a demand, then brands are forced to get behind it, governing bodies are forced to get behind it, and it just goes full circle eventually.
Well, I think we can agree that we do see progression in the game. And while that's a positive element, there's another battle to be fought. There's some deeper issues that are rooted in society that affect women, not only in football, but across sport. Tala Duman takes a look at the battle for equality for female athletes.
The growth of women's football is undeniable. But the issue of inequality for its players still runs deep. This year, the U.S. women's soccer team filed a gender discrimination lawsuit against their governing body in their battle for equality. They argue that although they play more games and are more decorated than the U.S. men's team, they still receive less pay. The disparities are making them fight on and off the pitch.
U.S. soccer was not really meeting the request of the EEOC, and within that we felt like it was time to leave it in the hands of the courts.
Ballon d'Or winner Ada Hegerberg should be gearing up for the World Cup, but she's refused to play for her national side Norway. Her reasons? The lack of respect for female footballers and pay inequality. So the show goes on without the world's best footballer, but the battle for equality is being fought on many other fronts. Let's say you're a professional athlete and you become a mother.
That's just crazy.
Despite Nike's ad campaign to Dream Crazy, it was exposed by 9-time Olympic medalist Allyson Felix and U.S. runner Alicia Montano for reducing their sponsorship payments during and after pregnancy. The sportswear giant has since made a U-turn and announced it will no longer financially penalize its athletes for becoming mothers. Great news, but it's concerning nonetheless, and raises questions of whether companies, brands, and governing bodies believe in the positive feminist ideals they're pushing.
Fine. Show them what crazy can do.
Inequality is a problem that's rooted in society, but it does bring up an important question. Without these athletes raising and exposing the issue, would we see any push for change?
Well, it is a valid question, and I asked the football commentator Vicky Sparks about whether we would actually see a change if these athletes didn't speak up.
I don't think we would see change in the same way if these high-profile women didn't speak up. I think it's so important. It raises the profile of the conversation. Take Ada Hegerberg, for example, the best player in women's football. She won the inaugural Women's Ballon d'Or in 2018, and she won't be playing at this Women's World Cup for Norway. She's made the decision not to play for the national team over the last couple of years because of what she perceives as inequality between the men's and the women's game. Now, the Norwegian FA would dispute that. They might point to their equal pay agreement that they brought in between the men's and the women's team. But clearly, Ada Hegerberg feels that not enough has been done. And she's made a stand that, obviously, as a world-class striker, not to be at a World Cup must be very difficult for her. So I think it's absolutely brilliant that women within sport, if they are feeling particularly frustrated, are taking a stand in whatever way that might be. Obviously, not every player, not every female sports person will make the decision that Ada Hegerberg has done, but certainly I think when women use their profile within sport to raise these questions, hopefully we're going to talk about what a wonderful Women's World Cup this is going to be, but we're also talking about Ada Hegerberg, we're also thinking about these issues of inequality, and she's really brought that to the fore. I think you see that within particularly the public perception sometimes, and some teams would feel even their federation's perception. Argentina's women's football team is perhaps a good example. So in the build-up to the qualifiers for this Women's World Cup, well, they'll be competing for the first time in 12 years, they actually went almost 2 years without having a manager and even a training session with the women's team. Now, there were wider issues going on with the Argentina FA at the time, but the women's team was certainly affected. When they did reconvene, they then went on strike because they claimed that they weren't being paid the per diems that they'd been promised. The idea that it's seen as a men's game, it's something a bit weird for women to be playing. They've had to overcome all those hurdles, all those barriers, and they've made their first World Cup for 12 years. This is a huge achievement for them just to be there, and a similar story in some ways with the Chile team as well and other teams. So you see that even at the national level there are women's teams who would say, well, actually we haven't always had the support, but I think that is changing now, and hopefully federations are coming around to the idea that actually women's sport at this high level is worth investing in. I think it certainly raises questions, and I think it's a reminder that sometimes, particularly as journalists, but also as the wider public, if we're buying products by a certain brand, we need to dig a little bit deeper. We need to say, is this just surface level lip service to the idea of women in sport, or does it go deeper? I think obviously it's positive that Nike have decided to end those, or have committed to ending those penalties for pregnancy, essentially. That's obviously a positive step, but it's a reminder that we do just need to dig in a little bit deeper.
So some positive signs, but there's still some way to go. And one person who is passionate about using her voice and her position for change is FIFA's Chief Women's Football Officer, Sarai Behrman. I sat down with her to talk about the governing body's goals for the World Cup and their plan for the women's game.
We want our players to become household names. Everybody knows Neymar, Ronaldo, Messi, those names, everybody knows them, whether they're a football fan or not. If you ask those same people who are the top female players, there's very few who'll be able to tell you. So we also need to increase the profile of our players.
The last Women's World Cup in Canada, that was a huge success. I mean, you broke records in terms of viewing figures as well. Is there a lot of pressure right now because you want to either match that or surpass that?
I wouldn't call it pressure, I would say it's momentum. I think it was a real eye-opener for the rest of the world that women's football is here, it's important, people are interested. We had 750 million broadcast views. This year we're aiming for 1 billion, so we want to keep pushing the envelope. In Canada we had more than 1.3 million fans show up in stadiums to enjoy the matches live, and we're aiming to improve on that in France again. So obviously we want to meet our targets for this competition, but from what I've seen in recent years with the interest in the women's game and the development and growth of it, I'm positive that we'll achieve those targets. When we look to grow the women's game, if you understand where it is relatively compared to the men's game, you understand that we need to address the entire landscape. There's no kind of one secret pill to grow the game.
So where would you say the women's game is right now?
It is still relatively in its infancy. The first Men's World Cup was in 1930 in Uruguay. The first Women's World Cup didn't take place until 61 years later in 1991. It wasn't until 2007 that prize money was introduced for that Women's World Cup. There are more and more steps being taken around the world, but if you look at the 211 members that we have, we obviously have very high developed countries where women are playing football and earning a living in doing so. And there are still countries in the world where it's difficult for a girl or a woman to even take foot onto a football field because of various cultural or religious barriers. Part of our promotion and push for the women's game is to bring it forward. And that's very much linked to the slogan of the competition this summer, which is Dare to Shine. Because it is time for women's football to shine now.
Let's talk about you and your position. You're seen as a very influential figure in football, in women's football. You were named as one of the most important people for sports this year. Do you feel any pressure?
Personally, yes, I have to say. Being named on that list for me was kind of crazy, but yeah, it's a big responsibility. It's not something I take lightly, and there is some pressure, because women's football deserves to be in the spotlight. Our players deserve to be paid the same as the male players. Our sport deserves to be at the same commercial value as the men's game, and there's a lot of work that needs to be put in order to get there, and I have support from the highest level also within Fifa, which is very, very important. And it's something I often like to pass on when I visit the member countries. The tone at the top makes a big difference. So that helps to ease the pressure a little bit. It's not all on my shoulders. Everyone within football's governing bodies actually has the responsibility to develop the women's game.
Right, let's turn our attention to matters on the pitch and to the runners and riders for the tournament, starting with the defending champions. And USA are the favourites to lift the trophy. With 3 World Cup titles to their name, Americans are counting on their experienced players such as Carly Lloyd, Alex Morgan and Megan Rapinoe. The hosts, France, are on the hunt for their very first title. They've never made it past the last 8 of any recent major tournaments, but with the core of the side consisting of 4-time Champions League winners Lyon, they have a good chance of winning on home soil. Anything less than that is a disappointment. Phil Neville's England team are expected to challenge for the title with their stellar attacking force, with Nikita Paris, who scored 19 goals in the Women's Super League this season, Barcelona's Tony Duggan and Euro 2017 Golden Boot winner Jodie Taylor. And finally, the dark horses of the tournament, Australia. The head coach, Ante Milicic, has only been at the helm for 3 months, but this is a side that's seen as their strongest ever squad, which includes one of the undisputed stars of the women's game, Sam Kerr. Paul Scott visited the Matildas in their training camp in Antalya.
For 3 consecutive World Cups, Australia have fallen at the quarter-final stage. But at their training camp in southern Turkey, there was a quiet air of optimism that this could be their year.
We've kind of been within the top 10 for the last couple of years. We've played the best teams in the world, and we showed that we can match that, and we've just progressed so much in the last couple of years. So I think we have pressure on ourselves definitely to perform, and we're just looking forward to that first game.
And that first game is on Sunday against Italy. Matches against Jamaica and Brazil follow. The Matildas, at number 6 in the world, are the highest ranked team in their group, and they're in it to win it.
And I don't think it's an outrageous thing for us to say by any means. I think everyone knows in the last few years we've played some amazing football, and no team enters any tournament just to enter it. You enter it to win it, and we certainly want to win it.
Preparation for France 2019 was disrupted after coach Alen Steic was sacked in February and replaced by Ante Milicic. Milicic was assistant manager for the men's team at the World Cups in Brazil and Russia. He brings with him big tournament experience. And if he can get the best out of this experienced and talented squad, it could be Australia's time to shine.
And I spoke to the former West Ham, Chelsea and England international Claire Rafferty about the favourites for the tournament and the ones to watch out for.
I think for France, in the past, that they have had a lot of pressure on them. They've had a very talented squad, but unfortunately they have been serial underachievers. They haven't actually got past, I think, the quarter-final for the last few competitions, and that doesn't correlate really with the talent they have. So the pressure is on them, especially after the men doing so well last year, especially with it being a home tournament. And I really hope for the country's sake and for a lot of them girls, and knowing how talented they are and playing against a lot of them in Champions League and for England, I know how much they are expected to win and how much talent they have, and it would be a waste if they didn't kind of step up to the plate.
Well, a lot has been made of the fact that, the core of this team is from, the all-dominating Lyon side. I mean, is that a huge factor, or are we just focusing too much on that?
I think, having just won the Champions League, it's quite a talking point. Lyon have dominated the last couple of years in France. And when you have such a huge number of players playing in one team, there are pros and cons to that. A positive is that they're all going to be on the same page. So technically, they're going to have similar awareness. They'll know how each other needs to be spoken to on and off the pitch. But at the same time, there could be some negative aspects. Other players coming in from other teams, they might have a bit of a clique, even down to small detail like sitting with each other at breakfast.
Does that really matter? In terms of you played on the international stage. How does that play into it?
It's important to kind of have everyone on the same page, and that it sounds really kind of petty, but it's really important, especially when you're with each other, for a month, every single day. You're doing the same kind of thing, exactly the same routine. Everyone needs to be getting on, and I think it's down to the manager to iron out them creases.
Yeah, well, one of the favourites in the tournament as well is Australia, and we've just had our reporter Paul talking about. This is their strongest squad, this is their time. I mean, what do you think of their chances right now?
Yeah, it's a difficult one with Australia because they were so strong in qualifying. Last year they've been talked about quite a lot as being favourites. As you said, they've got the likes of Sam Kerr, who I think currently is top goal scorer in the NWSL and in the W League, which is, for people who don't know, they play different times, so it's not like she's playing for two teams.
So she's playing all year round.
Yeah.
So is she going to suffer burnout at some point, or?
You'd think so, but I think playing in the sun probably helps a lot for Australia. But equally, I think she is carrying the pressure of her country. She has the expectation now. A lot of people said that she should have won the Ballon d'Or over Hedberg.
Why didn't she win the Ballon d'Or in your?
I think it's because the European football is a little bit more publicised. There's a little bit more weight in the voting process. And she's won back-to-back Champions Leagues, which obviously in the American League and the Australian League, that's not possible because they can't do that. But there's a lot more visibility, European-wise. I mean, she has a great celebration, a backflip, which I can't even try and emulate. But yeah, I think it's a natural progression for her. Europe will be the next stage, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a top English club come out. I don't want to see everyone go to Lyon because we don't want it to get too kind of top heavy at some of the bigger clubs. It was nice. I'd love her to come to the WSL and hopefully join Chelsea.
Okay, final question as well. You know what it's like to play on an international stage. Can you just talk us through what the players might be feeling from the moment they're called up until the moment they actually step foot on that pitch?
Yeah, I mean, it's everyone kind of highlights this stage before the tournament, but actually it's a journey over the year and a half through the qualifying stages. You see players come and go, squads of almost 30 sometimes to training camps, and as you get nearer the date where the squad's announced, you do start to get a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious. Have I done enough in the league? Have I done enough when I'm playing from the country? Ultimately, it is about waiting for that phone call. You get told before you get asked before how you want to be told. Do you want an email? Do you want a phone call? Do you want a text? Or did someone send a pigeon or something like that? But everyone's told normally the day before. It's then embargoed until the media find out the next day. So you have to be careful who you tell. I don't think a lot of people tell anyone more than their family, and even then I don't think my mum definitely couldn't keep her mouth shut, so I think she told half of Facebook before she was allowed to. But yeah, the pure excitement leading into it is palpable, and then it then begins, and you have to play the last couple of league games, maybe a little bit cagey because you don't want to get injured, but then you're in camp. It's the first week is quite relaxed because it's build up, and you're doing a lot of team bonding stuff, trying to nail down what formation tactics you're going to play, and then we've reached the latter stage of the camps, and you're going into the first games of the tournament, and all focus, I'd say probably 4 or 5 days before that game, that's when you're really kind of nailing down the game plan and who's starting.
So those are the favourites, but what about the newcomers? Well, one of the teams looking to make their mark on the international stage is Jamaica, with the Reggae Girls, one of 4 debutantes. But their presence isn't just a proud moment for the country, but for the Caribbean. Lungani Zama has more.
The Jamaican Reggae Girls are heading to their first ever FIFA Women's World Cup tournament this summer. After a dramatic qualification process in the Caribbean, Jamaica are looking to bring their unique flavour when they head to France.
Jamaica is a big party. All right, we're gonna bring a lot of flair to it. We're gonna bring a lot of noise to it. We call it the bangarangs. We're bringing everything to the game.
Well, the Reggae Girls, we have our style. I wouldn't want to speak much on it. So when the time comes, you'll see.
Now, with the showpiece on the horizon, the Jamaican players can barely contain their excitement.
I've been waiting my whole life for this moment, and we are here now, so there's no turning back. So every day from now on, prepare us closer to the World Cup. Whatever we do, we've got to prepare us for that moment.
And everybody knows it's a historic moment, not just for Jamaica, but for the Caribbean. To have just a Caribbean team go into the World Cup is just a big moment for the Caribbean, and I mean it's very inspiring, and the kids in Jamaica and all over the world can see that, hey, we're a small country, but we can still do it. I mean, every day matters, and every day you want to prepare yourself for the big moment, and I mean, obviously France is a big moment,
There will be no quiet introduction for Jamaica in France, as they have drawn the ultimate World Cup foe for their opening game of the tournament.
Obviously, we're going to play Brazil, which is a very similar upbeat, festive culture. So, we expect our first game to be entertaining. Brazil is a style of play that we as Jamaicans adopted long back in the 60s. So, it's something that we look forward to playing against Brazil.
The Reggae Girls may hail from a small nation, but Jamaica has always punched above its weight when it comes to international sport. This summer, the Reggae Girls plan to continue that fine tradition.
We're just gonna be ourselves, be Jamaicans, go out there and do our best to our ability, and just work hard. We're known for that. We're little but with talawa, so that's a little praise, and we're gonna work towards it and just make our country proud.
Well, the moment we've all been waiting for is almost here. That is it from me and the team here in Paris. Thank you very much for watching this Women's World Cup special. Make sure you enjoy the game and the tournaments. Bye.
Beyond the Game, brought to you by Turkish Airlines.